Acceptance is making decisions that are in alignment with the truth of the life you're living. What are we going to do? Pretend, if we have 1 or 2 really good months, we could believe, okay, now it's time to treat ourselves. We're going to go on vacation. We're going to do this. We're going to do that.
Yeah.
And for a couple of years, we did that, thinking, oh, it's turning around. And then bam, 2 months later, we're back to nothing.
Welcome to another episode of Real Talks with an Entrepreneur's Wife, where we help women that are in or have ever been in a relationship with an entrepreneur feel seen, heard, and understood by sharing our true and honest stories about our journeys, in hopes that something we say will help you along your journey, wherever that might be. I'm Janell, your friend and your sister in this journey as well. And today I have an amazing guest with me, another sister and friend. And I can already tell that at some point we're going to have her back for part 2, because this woman is wise. Not only is she a mom, but she's an attorney, she's an author, she's a speaker, she's an elder, and she is the wife of an entrepreneur. I welcome to this conversation today, Mrs. Naomi Claxton. Welcome to the conversation, Naomi. How are you today?
I am well, Janelle. I am well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing well. I am so glad to have you here today in this conversation. I want to get started by asking you, because of course we're talking about being a partner of an entrepreneur. I want to ask you, from your background, did you grow up in a family of entrepreneurs?
Absolutely not. I,
Okay.
like many Black Americans, grew up in a family who believed that your only available options as far as education were being a doctor, being a lawyer, being an engineer, maybe a teacher. There were very limited options. A nurse. My parents actually were a doctor and a nurse.
Mm,
And that was the motto. Boomer generation, you go to school, you work hard, you get a good job, you stay in that job, you retire from that job. And of course, we know life doesn't work like that anymore,
right.
but that was how I was raised. I will say my father, who is a doctor, has a penchant for moving around. He does not stay in one place. He has stayed in
Mm,
one profession, but not in one place. And early, I recognized that I have ADHD because he has ADHD. And
oh,
so, in addition to being a medical doctor, he also has a lot of ventures and a lot of things and interests that he has. So, I've always been exposed to entrepreneurial ambitions. I actually believe that if his parents had not pushed him so hard into being a doctor, he might have been an entrepreneur.
okay. All right. So you went on to school to be an attorney.
I did.
Did you have any visions of what your life was going to look like?
Oh, I absolutely did. I
Okay.
had a 3 year plan, a 5 year plan, a 10 year plan. And what I've recognized as I've gotten older, and as you mentioned, I'm an ordained elder 10, 15 years ago, maybe longer than that. I started this faith walk and I was impressed by the Holy Spirit to stop making plans. Remember
Mm,
what Proverbs says, the
yeah.
Lord, man makes their plans, but the Lord ordains their steps. And so I have learned, as Proverbs 16 says, to commit my ways to the Lord and he will establish them.
Mhm.
And what I will say is that my experience, my journey, my career has not been linear at all, but
Mm,
it has been wonderful. It has been a blessing. And I've ended up in places and spaces and at tables that I might not have been at had I been committed to the plan.
mm, I like that. So one of the things you shared is that for your husband, he went from being successfully self-employed to an entrepreneur. Now, exactly what does that mean? If you would share a little bit about what the difference is for those that are listening.
So entrepreneurship is a mindset. Entrepreneurship is innovation. Entrepreneurship is risk taking. And entrepreneurship is wanting to build and start something that has not existed before in the marketplace. entrepreneurs have high risk tolerance.
Mm.
And when I first joined the Entrepreneur's Wife community, I wasn't sure if I fit. Because when I met my husband, and I think I've shared this with you before, I was working in sales. He was working for a prominent Korean television company that we're not gonna, or, they also make electronics, a prominent Korean electronics company, let's say, that we're not going to plug here. But he told me, he was like, my dream is to quit my job and be an eBay drop shipper. And you could have heard a pen drop with the silence, because one thing I was not going to do was argue with this man, go back and forth. My husband and I at that point had been friends for 7 or 8 years, and we may have been dating for 6 months or so. And I was like, an eBay drop shipper. This is what we're doing in the year of our Lord 2008. I mean, this was not the early years of eBay. I mean, pretty much everything at that point, eBay was an established marketplace. And I'm thinking, this is not a sustainable life plan unless you have an investor, a capitalist who's going to subsidize you getting a huge volume of product from overseas that you can then make your ROI on. He did not have that. I did not say any of that.
Mm.
I said, hmm. And
Okay.
we just kept moving. And when I decided to go to law school, and I'm going to try to make this story as succinct as possible because I lived in Atlanta after school and worked for several years. I wanted to make sure that I was ready to go to graduate school and that I really still wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I applied to graduate school, I wanted to move to DC. My husband is born and raised in the district, which is where we now live. He did not want to move home. He said, let's try somewhere else. And so we were looking at all these places. And at that point, that was the place where God met me. And it was a commit your way to me. And
Okay.
I said, okay, wherever you say. And we ended up in Arizona. We get to Arizona. My husband actually came to Arizona with me. We were not married. We were still dating. And he drove out with me. I moved in with a roommate that I had met off Craigslist. Let me tell my age here.
What?
It was doable back then. And that's where I moved in
Yeah.
Tucson, it's a university town. And so
Okay.
if you're moving in the summer, you're looking for people who are starting a program, right? And so I was able to find a young woman who was from Alabama, a Black woman who was going into a PhD program at the same school I was going into on Craigslist. And we got an apartment together, and that, it worked out. And my husband at the time had not even quit his job. He was still going to be living in Alabama. 2 weeks later, he arrived with all of his things in his vehicle, gets an
Mm.
apartment in the same
Mm.
complex that I'm in, and a couple of weeks later, he has a job. Now, this job is something he's not done before. It's an editor job. And he's an excellent writer. He is an excellent writer. His grammar is top notch. He's from the Caribbean, went to private school with the Jamaican teachers, and they do not play. His grammar is impeccable. And so he gets this job editing um, at a company that does manuals for engineering, and they work in mining companies.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, this company is starting to move into providing this stuff online, but they don't have anybody to write the software for them. And he's like, well, that's what I went to school for. And they're like, we don't want to be a software company. You do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so he pitched them this proposal by which he owned a portion and they owned a portion, and they essentially paid him to write a software, a very, very expensive software, a software that was almost universally adopted with their clients. Most of their clients, however, were Chinese companies because they own most of the mines worldwide if you look into it. It's the Chinese companies and the American companies. And so over those years, and this started in about 2012, he
Mm-hmm.
traveled all over the globe. Namibia, Peru, Kazakhstan, Mexico,
Wow.
Alaska, Canada, any remote area where there are natural resources and that mines existed, he was
Yeah.
there, and he was installing and doing that work. And it was not entrepreneurship, right? Because it was very safe. He
Yeah.
had a built-in client, he had built-in clientele.
Mm-hmm.
He was being constantly called because this is a renewable resource, because not only did he write the software, he speaks Spanish. He learned Portuguese to do this, and he would do the trainings on this software. So even if they adopted the software, they would still need to do upgrades. And then he would go out and he would do trainings and show people how to use it. So 2015 hits and Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are running. And Hillary is saying, we're going to get rid of mines. And Donald Trump is saying all of this crazy inflammatory and incendiary stuff against China. And slowly the contracts start to dry up because the Chinese stand on business, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm telling my husband, I'm like, okay, well, we had been convicted at this point. It was time we'd had our family. It was time for us to move back to DC to get out of Arizona, not just because it was time. I was working as in a prosecutor's office during this campaign. I was working with law enforcement. It was a very, very difficult space.
Tech-
We decided we're moving.
I imagine so.
And he, essentially, he is trying to find a way to pivot this business that he has built into something that he can do virtually, but there's not a lot of work. The partners are retiring at an alarming rate, and their business structure was such that every time they left, huge amounts of money were sucked out of this company. And the new leadership did not have the relationship with him. So we moved, and it's like out of sight, out of mind, because they
Really?
also own this software. So now they're like, well, we own the software, we own the intellectual property. This was something that we had discussed. We can get anybody we want to maintain it. We can get anybody we want to upgrade it. We do not have to work with you. Yeah.
Ooh.
And so my husband, tried to work with them for a little while, recognized the new leadership wasn't that interested. And so now he starts to try to pivot. And this, unfortunately, is happening right at the right before the pandemic starts, because we moved here in 2018, the end of 2018. So it was about a year of trying to work with them. I think maybe he worked with one client that he had a really good relationship with who had asked for him. But other than that, that was it. And that was 2019. That was the last time he traveled with that company. 2020, I'm thinking, okay, well, we're going to get a job. We're going to go back into software engineering. This is
Yeah.
what I'm thinking is
He's
happening.
good at it.
This is what I'm thinking is happening.
Yeah.
But what is really happening is he has become convicted that he is not supposed to work for anybody. And so he's going to start another business. And this business we kind of talked about was SEO marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the pandemic. Everybody's at home. He has a lot of opportunities available to him because everybody wants to sell online, to do things online, but the business model was not working. There were no funds there. And so we go from a situation where my husband is easily making 3 times my salary. And I'm a lawyer. I worked for the state. So it's not like my salary was huge, but I had good benefits.
Yeah.
And it was stable. He was making easily 3 times, 3.5 times my salary to,
Good gracious.
him making less than 2/3 of what I was making here.
Ooh, how did that affect you?
I mean, financially, it's been incredibly difficult, incredibly different, incredibly difficult. I think the mindset shift that it takes to be an entrepreneur's wife is the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Financially, moving to a higher cost of living area for me meant we had to give up on certain things. I mean, there was not going to be a home here that we owned. There was not going to be private school here. I mean, we had to look for a good school district, and we had to be prepared to rent in that school district because we're not going to be able to do millions of dollars without the capital. And
Right.
so it fundamentally shifted the way we lived permanently. It has not pivoted, and then we've been here now 7 years.
Now, was there discussion leading into that, or it's just like things happen and you're like, whoa, I wasn't prepared for this?
That's a good question. I will simply say that I think I had expectations that he would just know that we require this level of support to live. And I didn't think I had to have the conversation, and that was a mistake. So by the time we did have the conversation, it was extremely contentious because he thinks that he's doing what he always intended to do, and he's not understanding why I'm upset about it.
Yeah, I get that. So whenever he was thinking of pivoting, did he have anything written, any business plan, things of that nature? Or was
So
this just all talk? He had these visions and, the what they call it, shiny syndrome.
shiny object syndrome.
That's it.
So, so here's the thing. When I was in law school, my husband was very clear that he wanted to transform what he was doing in that software operation into permanent entrepreneurship. He was trying to build his own team and write additional software that he would sell elsewhere. There
Hmm.
was a small startup that he had that worked on some educational software, but the founders also had families. And so when it was clear that VC funding was going to take, if they were able to get it, was going to take years to come through, they took
Mm-hmm.
jobs and left. And I, of course, had gone to law school thinking, maybe I want to do prosecution, maybe I want to do criminal defense, maybe I want to do, I never imagined that I'd end up doing what I did, which is take a bunch of classes in antitrust and corporate law and trademark and copyright and all of these things related to entrepreneurship because I was anxious. I think I've always known
Uh-huh.
because of the eBay dropshipping
Uh-huh.
that he had a penchant for entrepreneurship. Like I knew it's what he wanted to do, which is why I think I avoided the conversation more than he did because I needed more security and I did not want to have the conversation, which is simple. Like, if you are not able to bring in at this level, this is not a sustainable model for our family.
Yeah. So you're speaking now, if I knew what I knew then, what I know now. What was the turning point that made you come to that understanding? This is probably what we should have had. And at what point, like how far past him having these ideas and desires did you say, I should have had this? This is something we should have talked about.
In 2020, in
Mm.
2020, when we realized that he was not going to be able to continue to work with that company, there was not going to be any income. As
Mm-hmm.
long as there was the safety of having at least a few clients with residual income, and that lasted for about a year because he had commissions that they had to pay on an annual basis for support for their training programs that he then began to do virtually during the pandemic, which was wonderful, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
now he doesn't have to get up and leave for 10 days. I mean, when I was pregnant in 2017, he traveled for 117 days. It
Wow.
was horrendous. I
Wow.
was pregnant, I was preparing our home for sale, and I was studying to take the Maryland bar because I had not then been practicing in Arizona long enough to
Mm-hmm.
weigh in. And so I couldn't afford to be unemployed for a year, so I had to take the Maryland bar. And so as a result, I was very happy that he was able to work remotely for these clients, but we were not having the conversation about what this was going to look like when these contracts were up. Contracts were year by year.
Mm-hmm.
Again, refusing to have the conversations because I didn't want to be contentious, refusing to have the conversations because I didn't want to seem like a nag, refusing to
Yeah.
have the conversations because I was simply busy living life.
Yeah.
We had small children at the time. I was the one primarily, and we know as women, we bear the brunt of the emotional and sometimes even the physical labor, like labor in the home.
Yeah.
And I had found everywhere that we lived, right? I had been the one to find places for the kids to go to school. Logistics are very difficult, especially in a large area like the DMV where there are so many options. So I was absolutely consumed with where are we going to live? Where are the
Yeah.
kids going to go to school? What is going to be a safe, comfortable place that we can stay for a reasonable amount of time? Because I'm still at this point grieving the fact that I don't get to have a house. Because in Arizona, we had a home. And I thought, we're going to go here. We're going to find some place in Maryland. We're going to buy a house, and that's going to be that.
So with that, I'm wondering now because you were used to being that wife of a successful self-employed man. Did you have any thoughts or idea about what it was going to mean for you now transitioning to being that wife of an entrepreneur? Did you think it would be the same, the support that you would need to provide would be the same? And if it wasn't, what helped you to realize this is different?
During the pandemic, my brother passed away, and my
Mm,
grandmother and great uncle, who were living together at the time, got very sick. They got COVID. And
mm,
I was incredibly grateful because my husband, he had a lot of time on his hands. So when I needed to get up and go, when I needed to go do things for my family with my family, it was fine. Like we could just go and do, and he had the flexibility. And to answer your question, I recognized the shift almost immediately because my husband's mental health started to decline. And there was a point, and I think anyone who's been married to an entrepreneur who has had success, whether limited or not, I mean, there are a lot of people who believe in grind culture, They get up
right,
at 4 a.m., they work all day.
right.
They work till midnight. They get up at 4 a.m. They work till midnight
Yep.
because they think that this is what it takes to make it. When my husband started working like that, we weren't really seeing him. He was intentionally spending time with our kids during the day, like taking bits, but then he made up for that by working until 4 a.m. And when he's doing that, right, and the money's not coming in,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
he's not sleeping, I feel too guilty to have a conversation with him because I can see how hard he's working.
Right.
I recognize then that I needed support.
So we've made it to this point in the episode, and you're still here with us. I truly believe that something was said in this conversation that spoke to you. And because of that, I encourage you to take a few moments to journal about what resonated in your mind and in your heart. Journaling can be such a powerful form of self care and clarity. And I would love to help you with that. Simply send me an email to realtalkswithjanelle@gmail.com and I'll send a journal prompt directly to your inbox. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
So I have always believed
You realize you needed what?
support.
Yeah.
So that's when I started looking for entrepreneurship communities. That's how long I've been connected to groups and to communities of entrepreneurs' wives. I literally Googled entrepreneurs' wives because I was like, I have a therapist. I'm talking to my therapist. I believe in seeking the support you need because I was also dealing with a hostile work environment. And so I had
Mm,
a Black woman therapist, and we know again how our families were raised. My therapist was Haitian, you know, high achiever. These women are very much giving, he needs to get it together or you need to leave him. And at a certain point, I was like, well, I can't talk to my therapist about this because she does not understand this lifestyle. I need to find a community of
right,
support. And
right.
so I went and I intentionally looked for a community of support. But another thing that I recognized during this period was that I had been also intentionally or unintentionally dimming my light because I was so anxious about him.
Yeah,
I
right.
wanted him to feel successful in certain areas. I wanted him to feel, so my husband is also an elder. My husband is a speaker. My husband had his own podcast. There were many things that I wanted to do that I was not doing because I felt like if I do that, he'll feel even worse. And so I had to find one, a community of support, but two, I had to get a new therapist. I had to get a
Yeah,
new therapist that was not going to be triggered by, and that's really
yeah,
hard.
that's true.
It's very difficult because actually this was 2 years ago. My current therapist is also triggered. Our, my husband and I have seasonally done couples counseling. We've been in couples counseling about 5 times, different issues, different therapists. We think it's
Yeah,
important to check in, to touch bases on our marriage because our
right.
marriage is a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
We are not just married because we love each other. We're married because we have joint goals, joint interests. We're married because we are building together.
Yeah, so
And
true.
that building is not just financial. And so this period, and this was a couple of years ago, we're in couples counseling. And I realized the wife is triggered by the same things I'm triggered by. And they're not going to be effective in helping us deal with this entrepreneur challenge because apparently her husband had pivoted into being a therapist. It was interesting. It was really interesting.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I've
Ooh.
had a very hard time. Again, the spaces where I've been able to get the support and been able to explain, we are not just building finances. We are building more than that,
Yeah.
have not been Black spaces primarily. And that honestly breaks my heart. But then when I look at what's going on in the culture,
Mm-hmm.
when I look at
Mm-hmm.
the man versus woman debate, when I look at that most ridiculous Cheesecake Factory date conversation, like my husband and I used to go to tiny little ethnic places. That's where the best food is. It doesn't matter that it's not a 7-star dining experience with a
Right.
valet and bottles. I mean, we don't even drink, so
Yeah.
whatever. It's the conversations in our community have not been, how do I say this? Have not prepared women, Black women, to live lives with men who are building things. But then we want to be upset when they go and marry other races.
You just said something. You just said a lot, actually. So, when you found this community, because for me, that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast, is because there weren't enough conversations being had from the woman's perspective. So, when you found this community, did you feel comfortable right off with discussing and verbalizing what your concerns were, and were you getting the support you needed?
So, if we're talking about the same community, it was very active a few years ago. The founder had written a book and she was talking about a lot of these issues, and a lot of women were facing the same thing. So, in many cases, I was just reading the comments and kind
Yeah.
of lurking and liking
Yeah.
and gleaning wisdom from women who had been entrepreneur spouses for decades at that point. At this point, my husband was pivoting into entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
moving from being a business partner, collaborator, really a co-owner of something, to building his own thing. And so I did not feel like I had a lot to share. I may have made maybe 1 or 2 posts about how to have conversations. And I felt like I got a lot of good feedback on those posts and I was able to use some of that information.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great because same with me. However, I didn't find the community as early as you did. I was suffering in silence, and I'm just gonna be honest, because just the community around me, I didn't know who to talk to. I
Mhm.
didn't feel like there were a lot of people that were experiencing, but I believe that was, you know, people don't want to say the devil, don't blame it on the devil, but it was the devil. It was the devil. I'm gonna say it was the devil, leading me to believe or having me to believe I'm by myself. I'm suffering this alone. But over time and therapy and things like that, I'm convicted now, I can't be the only one. And that's why I've started this podcast in order to be able to have people as women to speak up about these issues and, hopefully the women that need to hear and have that space of feeling like I'm not alone, that breath of fresh air,
Mhm.
I'm not alone.
Yeah.
I pray that they do find this podcast. But so as far as family, because you went seeking outside,
Mhm.
family and friends, what was that like as far as support around the challenges you were experiencing? Because of course they know or think they know about all the success that you guys were having. And so now for you guys to pivot, having that conversation with them as well. How was that?
I don't think we ever had the conversation outside of with my husband's father because my husband's father is a business owner. He is a professional who is a business owner.
Okay.
So he is a CPA. He has been so for his entire life. He actually went to law school. I don't think he ever took the bar. He was going to do tax law, but then he recognized, in certain instances, CPAs can represent their clients without being a practicing attorney, and he did not want to do the litigation piece, so he never took the bar. But when the situation first started happening in 2020, late 2019 when the contract started drying up.
Mm-hmm.
We were struggling because I'm still working for a government entity. And so while I've gotten a significant pay raise from what I was making in Arizona,
Mm-hmm.
it's not enough to sustain us living in this area. And we were starting to financially really feel it because our lifestyle was set up for making, and I don't want to talk dollars and cents, but just say our lifestyle was not set up to survive on my income.
Yeah.
And again, one thing I have been is consistent in my communication. So I told my husband, I said, "You want children." I never really wanted biological children. I wanted maybe to adopt one or two out of the system. I had a philosophy that the earth was overpopulated. And honestly, I
Oh.
wanted to give back. And I did not have a strong desire to have, not because I don't like children, I do. But if we see where we're living now, if we see what's going on across the world,
Yeah.
I mean, the horror. I did not feel that it was necessary to bring a child into the world. I wanted to take a child out of a situation. And God blessed. He gave me three, and I'm grateful. However, five children, one income, this is not a thing. And so in 2020, when we're having these conversations, I'm I don't know my in-laws well, I've met them on occasions. They've come out for our
Okay.
wedding. They came out when our oldest biological son was born.
Okay.
They've met all of the children, but we are not close.
Okay.
And in conversations with them, there has been a little bit of my husband and his father did not have the best relationship, but his father was a business owner. And so I was concerned about this idea of going into SEO marketing.
Yeah.
You talked about that.
Yeah.
I could see what was happening, and it did not seem that people were making money from the marketing, but from selling courses about how to do the marketing.
Yeah.
And the market was saturated, right? And so I'm looking at this, and again, I do my research. I'm an oldest daughter, so our theme song, I was right, I was right, everything I said was right. It would have been better if we just listened to me. So I have this loop in my head, and I'm furious at this point, right? And so I say, we got to talk to his father because we got to get him back on track. This man is a software developer. He knows how to do it. He needs to go back to doing that. It doesn't matter if he does a job. It doesn't matter if he does it here. He needs to go back to doing it. He needs to work where his area of expertise is. And so I talked to his father, did not go well. His father, our conversation went fine. His father was very much like, yes, he needs to get a job. And he's like, well, you don't have a job. He's like, I absolutely do. I'm a CPA. I just own my own business. It's like me as an attorney. The difference between me setting up a website and saying my life is now coaching and selling my books versus the job that I go to every day that provides. And I'm not saying my job provides because God provides, but my job supports our lifestyle.
Yeah.
So it did not go well. My parents, my father, with his entrepreneurial ambitions and ADHD, thinks it's a great idea. We also don't have the best relationship. Like both of us have kind of some father issues. And it's not that we don't like our fathers, but we see
Yeah.
our fathers, right? So I
Yeah.
think for me, the fact that my father is supportive is actually a downside. For him, the fact that his father is opposed to it is a downside, right? And so it's been that situation. And our moms are just like both, well, And so family has not, it has not been, he has not gotten, from what I know, peer pressure from family about moving back into something that is more, I don't even want to say lucrative, but stable. He hasn't gotten that kind of pressure from family, but he also really hasn't gotten that kind of pressure from me. And part of that was because, again, I was really struggling with the things that I wanted to do because a lot of the resentment came from promises that were made very early when he first went out on his own because there were things that happened, and as an entrepreneur's wife, they have big dreams and they have big goals. And if the funds
Right.
are there, instead of spending the funds to create stability, instead of investing in insurance, instead of investing in, for example, a rental property, I wanted to buy a rental property in Arizona and have that as sustainable income for our family.
Yeah.
He wanted to have an office. He wanted to hire employees. And I'm like, I don't think that the business model you have really supports that. And that lasted between us for a really long time because it was a huge financial outlay that really financially devastated our family for years. I don't know if we've recovered from that. I mean, thousands upon thousands of dollars monthly for employees that really weren't adding any value and
Mm,
for an
yeah.
office space that he didn't need. Because when we were shopping for our home, he said, I want, and in Arizona, the houses are huge, the space is available.
Right.
He said on his list, I want a home that has a separate office with a separate entrance and a separate bathroom. He had all of that plus a kitchenette. So he could have clients come into his office without ever seeing the inside of our home.
Right. Right.
So for me, I was very resentful because that home was very far from my job. So I had a huge commute to make this happen for him. And then he went out and got an office that we also
Mm,
could not afford. So it was, and again, the bigger issue was that I was not able to express my emotions in a way that made sense. Because sometimes we look at these situations and instead of saying, hey, this is not what we discussed. And here are the reasons why we say, if I say anything, I'm going to end up crashing out. And so I'm just not going to say anything at all.
right.
And
Right.
we suppress our desires. We suppress what we know is right because
Yeah.
we want to seem supportive.
Yeah.
Because we see what happens. And I want to go back to the culture here because we see what they say about Black women. Oh, they're angry. Oh, they're unsupportive. Oh, this is why we got to
Yeah.
go marry this person and that
Yeah.
person because we can't get that support in our own community.
Yeah.
And at this point, I went back to my roots because when I was 20 or 21, I had a good friend who introduced me to the concept of codependency.
Mm,
And
okay.
she told me, she said, until we are able to separate our needs, wants, desires, and identity from the people who are around us, research, science, medical research has shown that for children, their identity is formed before they are 10 years old, between 1 and 7.
Mm,
Everything they believe about themselves. And that is why it is so difficult when you're adopting older children. Why it's so difficult to change the mindset of a child who has come from trauma, abuse, and neglect.
right.
It's not impossible, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And so I had to do a lot of work on what I thought and believed about myself, my value, my worth, in order to be able to enter into healthy partnership and healthy relationships and hold boundaries and space for myself. And I had to go back to that
That's
because I
good.
realized I did not want to pursue what I wanted if I thought that it would make him feel like less of a man, less of a provider, less of a husband.
Yeah.
And that I think is what keeps a lot of entrepreneur spouses, entrepreneur partners from having real conversations.
So would you say you've come to that place of acceptance now?
I have
That he
absolutely come
is,
to a place of acceptance.
that he's an entrepreneur.
I have come to a place of acceptance. The thing is, acceptance is a journey.
Yeah.
Acceptance is not a destination. And I need people to understand that because I accept who he is fully and completely. Do I still wish that he would go and find something that is stable, that would support our family comfortably? Absolutely. Every single day.
Every
But
single
am
day.
I living in bitterness and resentment and manipulation, trying to send him jobs every day? No. Do I succumb to that at 3 a.m. the night before the rent is due every couple of months? Yes. Yes.
So how do you keep yourself from doing that?
Pray. I continue to invest in myself and my therapy, but I also have decided that who I am cannot wait for who he is going to be.
Say
And
that
so
again.
I decided that who I am cannot and will not wait for who he is becoming. It's not going to happen. And so what I had to do and what I did during this period was go back through my journey of codependency because I realized so many Black women don't even know what it is. And most of us are codependent in some way.
Yeah.
And recognizing that who I am and the decisions that I make have to be the decisions that I'm making for myself and my children and not for my spouse, not for my parents, not for the people around us has been freeing. I don't have to live a certain type of lifestyle. I don't have to. And fortunately for me, I think a lot of us were raised with very image conscious parents because that generation, it's like, you're going to be clean. You're going to have everything that's appropriate. My mom was all about a new dress, new shoes, new purse for all these occasions. I've become very minimalist
Yeah.
because if you're going to accept that you have to live with this degree of volatility and insecurity, you have to accept you're not going to be able to be flexing. Fortunately, I don't care. Fortunately, I have never cared about that. I have
Yeah.
never cared about labels. So I
Same.
will say for me, it was easy.
Yes. I agree.
But acceptance means that you make decisions that are in accordance with the truth of your situation. And what happens for a lot of us is we believe them when they say, oh, it's coming. Oh, this contract is going to come. This money is coming. Oh, this is going to pay out. Look at all this money this person made. We can make this much a month or that much a month. And we're building our lives on the hypothetical funds that if they come, they're months down the line. And so we've gone months with nothing. And that math does not math. So if you're going to make $12,000 a month and you tell me this in January and you get $12,000 in July, sir, you have just made $2,000 a
A
month.
month. That's right. So, what type of boundaries or protection did you guys put in place from a financial standpoint? Because you had the plans of getting a house with the office, and then he went off and bought something else. So, were you able to put in any boundaries or anything like that in place so that that type of thing didn't happen again, or less
So let's
likely to
let's be
happen?
clear. We had the house and the office at the same time, and that's what contributed to our financial ruin. Like we were
Okay.
not able to save anything. Our funds were just being thrown away on this office that cost as much as a house as our mortgage. The office cost as much as our mortgage. And then there was an employee that made the house and the mortgage, including all bills, car note, insurance, everything the same as
Oh,
the
wow.
business.
Yeah.
So we're basically supporting two entire lifestyles. And what happened as a result of that was we had to sit down and have a conversation about one, opening credit, two, not just hiring employees, but the method by which they were paid. Because contractors and employees are two different things. I don't want to get too
That's
deep
right.
down the path of lawyer speak, but obligating yourself to a contract in which you're going to pay someone for a specific period of time, which a lot of people want, because obviously they want guaranteed income,
Right.
is not something that you are able to do when you don't have proven results and a stable source of income from clients. And so we had to have that conversation. It was not an easy conversation. That has not happened again. But for me, acceptance means for me and for him operating with the funds that we have. Like we essentially have to budget with what I make. And then whatever he makes can then now service debt because what are we going to do? Pretend, if we have one or two really good months, we could believe, okay, now it's time to treat ourselves. We're going to go on vacation. We're going to do this. We're going to do that.
Yeah.
And for a couple of years, we did that, thinking, oh, it's turning around. And then bam, 2 months later, we're back to nothing.
Yeah.
And I had to get to the point where I said, acceptance is not just saying, oh, this is how it's going to be. Acceptance is making decisions that are in alignment with the truth of the life you're living. So you have to say to yourself, I cannot do this, that, and the next thing. And that's been really
Yep.
hard for me. I was going on girls' trips every year with my best friends. For the past couple of years, I've had to tell them. One time we went to Atlanta because I was like, I don't have funds to do an international trip. And they've been in the group chat. And I had to say, I do not have it. I cannot do it.
Yeah. Yeah. How
And
did
if
that
I
make you
look at the
feel?
money that I make, I could easily say, oh, I deserve it. I make enough money to do this. I have two children in school. And the reality is our lifestyle falls here. I cannot do it. And I have
Yeah.
to accept that. So those are the types of decisions. And this is not about being codependent and saying, I'm going to support this man. We have 5 children. And again, what we're building is not just financial. And
So you
so,
still dream with him as far as the business go, would you say?
no, no, there are women who will do that, who have the capacity to do that. I do not.
Mm,
And part of my boundary is I don't want to hear about it. I just want to see it.
okay.
And I like that may sound cruel or uncaring. I listen. I'm a listening ear.
Yeah.
I provide advice. I will weigh in. I will provide wisdom. I will say, oh, yes, I think we should do this or I think we should do that. But as far as talking about plans and what we could and should and maybe,
Yeah.
it depends.
Yeah.
From a spiritual standpoint, my husband writes books on spiritual warfare. That's
Okay.
part of that's a separate part of his brand. It's not what he's primarily doing now.
Okay.
We talk about that a lot because that's an experience that we've had together. Our
Okay.
joint experiences make up that book. But when it comes to what he's going to do and how he's going to run his business, we fundamentally disagree on a lot of things. And for my sanity, I do not have those conversations. And I think some women should do that because otherwise, from a spiritual standpoint, I want to say this. We are Christians. From a spiritual standpoint, I was convicted 4 years ago that I had bitterness in my heart about the financial. I don't want to call them mistakes because they were decisions that we made based
Yeah.
on the information that we had. But I agreed to those decisions knowing that they were wrong.
Oh,
I acquiesced because I did not want to be the big, bad, angry black woman standing between him and his dreams. And so I had bitterness in my heart. I was furious at him, but I was also still very angry at myself.
yeah. Yeah. I can relate to that feeling.
And so I had to get to a space where I had excised that bitterness. I had to forgive myself and I had to forgive him. But a part of that has been I don't want to be involved in those decisions because in many instances I did not have capacity. I was pregnant when I was being pressured to agree. Mind you, we were about to have to pay for daycare and he wanted to get an office.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's tough when, like you said, you knew or you felt strongly that it was the wrong decision, but you followed along. Do you feel like it was one of those things where, excuse me, the man is the head? Do you feel like you were following based on that, the biblical teachings and things of that nature?
So my book that I just wrote, and we haven't talked about that because I'm also a coach. I actually am pivoting into being a codependency coach. I've been a coach for 12 years, and I wrote a book recently. I actually have a copy here. I think I've sent you a copy.
Yes,
For His Glory, Disclosing and Destroying the Spiritual Roots of Codependency. Oh, you have it.
I have it. Yes.
Is about spiritual trauma and abuse and the decisions that women make that are based on the lies that the church and sometimes their parents have told them about who they are and how they're supposed to show up. You're supposed to give. You're supposed to be quiet. You're supposed to submit. I was very angry about that as a young person. I did not believe that I needed to submit, that I was going to submit. And then I started submitting to God. And that made it easy for me to submit to my husband. However, there is a difference between being living in submission and being boo boo the fool.
Tell us more.
There is a difference. So I submit to my husband's headship in our home. I submit to his leadership in our home. But when we're making decisions, especially large financial decisions, my input is as equally as
That's
important as
important.
his. And you need to understand
Yeah.
as a wife, as a woman, if you are married to an entrepreneur and you are financially literate, you are a person who works and supports the family. You understand how to stretch, because we have had to stretch a dollar across a few months, right? We can sit here and figure out how to
Yes.
feed our family out of pantry food for 6 weeks because we had to pay the mortgage and that took our whole check.
Yeah.
We understand these, we have an equal right in the financial decisions. Proverbs 31 makes very clear that a woman is to be respected and her feedback and input is to be valued in these homemaking decisions.
Yeah.
And so I do not feel that it was submission that caused me to make that decision. I feel that it was codependency. I did not want my husband to be embarrassed. I did not want him to feel as though I did not support him. And I was willing to allow him to do what I knew would be. The next thing is this. I listened to the words that came out of his mouth when I had read the paperwork and I knew that that was not the terms. And we do that. And we just hope and pray everything's going to be okay. And in most cases, it's not. And this is how we destroy our own homes, our own marriages, our own mental health, our own finances. So again, I encourage women to get to acceptance, not because it's easy, but because if you want to be with this man, you have to start speaking up. Remember, people say, oh, I just want peace. Peace is not the absence of conflict.
Yeah.
It is the presence of justice.